3 years ago, believe it or not, CitizenCon was digital. This year, CitizenCon is digital. Without going into too much detail, I'm going to show you what CitizenCon looked like all that time ago and what kind of things we discovered. And maybe we'll take a little bit of a look at what kind of things were announced that we still don't have. But ultimately, I want to set expectations for what to expect at CitizenCon this year. Because already we can see some signs of not good things. Well, I won't say not good things. We see signs of them being more focused on the game than CitizenCon. And we already know that because it's digital, but we can also see that just by how little time it's taking this year. So CitizenCon Direct 2025, mark your calendars. It lands in October 11th. Looking at the details on the Spectrum post, how long will it be? This year's showcase will be shorter than a traditional physical or digital CitizenCon, but it'll be densely packed with exciting content and reveals you won't want to miss. They don't give an exact time, but it's definitely going to be shorter than even a traditional digital CitizenCon. Now, how long is that? 2022, it was 5.5 hours long. And what did we see during that? We saw a explanation of Star Citizen's outlaw-style outposts and space stations. We saw a ship talk, as we always do. We saw a special on engineering, which we're still waiting for. We saw a special on the Lorville art rework, which really was a placeholder. We saw something on master modes, something on underground facilities, on investigations, and on Pyro. Now, we don't have quite a few of these things. We don't have engineering. We don't have underground facilities. We don't have investigation missions. During that time, we also saw the Squadron 42. You might be remembering this at this point. I'll click in real quick. You can remember some footage. This is actually the first place we ever saw Quantum Boost, which was in this video.
Of interest will be just points.
Yeah.
But basically, we've done a scan. We've got some points of interest that are, multiple 10Ks away.
And you can see the distance there. It says 13,000 kilometers on the right-hand side. So this is obviously just placeholder UI for the Quantum Boost. Again, you can just boost over there. Yeah. And it obviously has this interactive gameplay, which obviously went into...
Yeah, and this, by the way, that's all programmer work in progress from Yogi on the Quantum Boost.
Not gonna lie, now that I've seen a lot more Quantum Boost and the ways that it's developed over time, because it's changed since this, I actually want them to make it so that we can guide Quantum Boost. It's not just like a straight line, keep it in line with your travel. I want it to work like Super Cruise and Elite Dangerous. I want this to be something that strategically you have to time getting out of Quantum Boost and stuff, because if they're going to make it have this sense of like, you need to control this, and we're traveling at 1,200, 1,300 meters per second doing this, I want it to be something we can completely guide, as opposed to just keeping on the rails kind of. They say 2 hours in another post? 2.5 hours, okay. Yeah, I think I remember hearing something like that. Looking at some more of the stuff that was delivered, or at least shown during this is where we saw underground facilities. Been over this a couple times in the last few weeks.
This is how, again, we're going to try and keep verticality as a traversal motif in mind. Now, going from a large corridor set to what we're considering here medium or small. So these are the tertiary networks that will link into the primary traversal route. So these again will be continuing the radial motif that we've been seeing, and these would take the player and connect into the main spaces.
I think this is the kind of stuff that is leading to the abandoned underground facilities. Not that it's a direct line from here to there. It's not the art we're seeing in these videos. I do think it falls in like the same line of what they're thinking for these ASD facilities in 4.3.
Underground lakes, maybe it's lava, maybe it's acidic. And also if we're describing these locations as maybe some are more abandoned, we could start to showcase how nature slowly started to take over. This also would introduce some pretty cool opportunities. So also,
and that's underground facilities. This was CitizenCon, and as you can see, it really just plays out kind of like an Inside Star Citizen. I think that's probably what we're going to get this year as well. And they'll probably be on the topics that are very close at hand, as opposed to all of these, which are more conceptual. So I'm thinking base building, crafting. I would guess that they would do one to try and show what they have planned for Star Systems next. A more substantial version of what they did last year with the Beyond Pyro panel. And I think that would also include maybe some of the plans that they have for Stanton. They need to rework R Corp. They need to add the Air and Halo belt gates, and they need to add factions. But I think like what a lot of people are saying, they have a lot of stuff they don't need to talk about anymore. Most of it's out on the table and still hasn't been delivered. So they're working on that. There's no reason to talk about stuff you've already shared everything about. This was honestly the most exciting part of this CitizenCon for me, because these kinds of missions, it just felt like could really, if this was actually a standardized part of the game, not just as a mission, but as a module that could go into other missions like mercenary missions and stuff like that, I think this would be one of the more interesting parts of the game. But these have basically not been mentioned since this CitizenCon panel 3 years ago.
Currently in the game, the player can feel like a bounty hunter, a mercenary, a person who does deliveries, you know, a cargo hauler. We want to make them feel like a detective as a new route. You know, we're expanding constantly. We're building mining, salvage, and detective is going to be our focus in MFT.
The experience we want to give players with the investigation mission is that they feel like a detective, that they feel like they're collecting evidence that will ultimately answer the question that has been posed to them, and that they're able to kind of search through the evidence and find the red herrings and like choose the right answer.
So what we want is we want to build a mission that requires you to have to think, requires you to have to look around, search your environment in detail, look at each individual clue and make sure you fully understand it before you make your decision as the detective.
And there'll also be red herrings thrown in there, so evidence will really have to be like poured over to be able to determine whether it's actually credible or not.
You guys might remember this kind of gameplay from the Covalix mission, which I think was their template that they can move forward with. I think we were supposed to get a lot more of these in different areas in the game, and something happened, and they didn't work on them because they had to work on something else.
There, and they're all crossed off until one. And if you're smart, you'll go to that location, and should you go to that location and do a little searching, you'll find his body there, and he's been like electrocuted, fixing the final thing on his list. And there's your definitive ending.
That sucks.
Whereas the second pitch, it's more about allowing the player to choose when they're done, like when they think they have solved the mystery. And the way we do this is we scatter evidence around the location and clues that lead you to that evidence. And obviously there can be red herrings in there. You can get your answer up to a credible state, which might still be the wrong answer but you can complete the mission then. Whereas
I love
if you
that.
have carried on digging a little more, maybe found a few more clues and followed them, you would perhaps find an indisputable piece of evidence, like, you know, I did it kind of thing, that would get you like the bonus for the mission. And both pitches had their strengths and weaknesses. The simple pitch, we could see how easy it was to scale, and it involved less complex narrative work. But we ultimately decided to go for the second because we liked the idea of giving the player the agency to decide when they were done.
It's such a cool idea. I would love missions like that, but it also sounds difficult. I don't see how you could do that without creating a system that spawns those kinds of missions dynamically in locations, because requiring the devs to make those handmade every time in all the different locations, I mean, how quickly does somebody get through every investigation in an area, if that's the case? Continuing on with CitizenCon 2022, there was another panel here. Engineering. Got to see a little bit of what engineering was supposed to look like back then. Actually, they did a good job of telling us everything that it was supposed to encompass, which we still haven't heard an updated list for, but we've definitely, it sounds like what we're getting in engineering is going to be a broken down version of all this, so we'll get certain parts over time, not all of it at once, as you know, they do.
Resource management can be broken down into several key elements: power, energy resources, life support, item maintenance, relay handling, access control, and gravity. So let's start with power, energy, and resources.
The access control is such a big thing. that can make all the difference for this game. If you go in and you can't control certain things on a ship, even if you're in the party, I feel like access control is tied at the hip to ownership. And if they can update the ownership system, we could do a lot more interesting stuff as like groups and orgs and friends. Here's what engineering looked like at that time, though.
And with the power system, we already can distribute the base energy and base fuel throughout the ship. So we can make sure that each item actually gets the resources they need. Creating your own resource path is basically defining the routes, or the most efficient routes that the energy or the resources have to take throughout your ship.
Is this what you mean by the jump ship kind of gameplay?
We can also demonstrate many aspects of the life support system, including making new players suffocate.
Love that horn in this sound. We're gonna have way too much fun with this. We're gonna troll each other so much with life support, it's gonna get ridiculous.
Fire expulsion.
Halo flashbacks? Honestly, I'm getting flashbacks of just running out of space stations without my helmet on.
Change the temperature in each room.
If everybody's still wearing their flight suit, their space suits all the time. True. That will make a difference, but it also sounds like with Starware, they're getting closer to the point where we won't be doing that. I don't think life support's in V1, no. I really do like that the oxygen, the fire eats oxygen. That's a crazy systemic kind of thing that I hope it's for all fire and not just fire caused by the player.
Venting and filling rooms with atmosphere. And making players suffocate again.
Always making players suffocate. And then this one I think is the most interesting, just showing how you can basically sabotage a ship from inside, which will be cool for like sneaking on board a ship and then taking it out before the rest of your group gets there. Basically just disabling shields from inside. So that's just another look. Like I said, we also got one for master modes. We got one for the ships, outlaw areas, and then we got to look at the planets coming up in Pyro.
Similar
like a
to
hands-on with most of the major locations.
And density, so it looks really nice when it like covers these rocks. And then we also have like lots of smaller moss on the ground. We combine it with like yellow grass, and it makes for like a really interesting biome. So it was really important for us to make this biome look really dense. So we pushed the amount of acids that we're using. So it's basically completely covered in foliage. Compared to Hurston, for example, Hurston and Microtech, which are probably our densest planets when it comes to foliage, this is way denser. The good thing is that we don't have any trees here, so all the budget we can use on ground cover, on grass. Now we jump to a Pyro coast biome. The improvements we got to the coast biomes is that we can now use a OPR override for every single biome. Previously, we could only use one global override per planet, which, as you can imagine, is not enough when you have something like Stanton 4, where you have snowy regions and spruce tree regions, and one object preset just can't cover every coast.
So there is another look at another panel. Really, the point of me showing you all these is just to kind of set expectations as to what this stuff looks like. They're not going to be this long. These are all like 30-minute long panels, as I said. This is a 5.5-hour CitizenCon. This year's CitizenCon Direct is planned to be what sounds like closer to 2 hours, 2.5 hours maybe. And probably not as big as an event because, as we all know, they are focused on Squadron. And who knows, maybe this will be their kickoff point for Squadron 42's marketing. Honestly, we're going to have to talk about that at some point. If Squadron is releasing next year, they've got a difficult marketing campaign ahead of them with Grand Theft Auto coming up. But also, I feel like, actually, no, there's not really any other big space games that I can think of. But Grand Theft Auto is going to make it difficult for everybody. A release day at CitizenCon? I don't think they should. I think maybe they could do like a quarter or a half. They could see like Q4 of 2026 or whatever. I don't think that they should do a specific date though. They shouldn't do a specific date for Squadron 42 until the game has literally been sent to vendors. And they can be like, okay, it's good. Gonna release in 3 weeks. I don't think this is going to be a super hype CitizenCon like with features and stuff. I think this is going to be a very progress report kind of CitizenCon and a chance for them to start shifting their messaging and advertising towards Star Citizen 1.0 and Squadron 42. Last year they did that a whole bunch, but this year feels like they've actually done some effort towards that direction and they can flaunt that a little bit and talk about next steps. So we'll see what it is, but I think it's going to be a fairly small deal compared to what last year's CitizenCon was.